Hello and welcome back, fourth graders. Mr. Guyton here, and today we're going to be talking comparisons. Yeah, comparison is when we take two objects and we compare their value. That is to say, we try to figure out which one is greater and which one is less. Now, this is something you do all the time with familiar objects. For example, if I were to ask you which is greater, a car or an ice cream cone, you could probably tell me very easily that the car is larger than the ice cream cone. Well, we can do it with other objects as well. Like if I were to ask you which has a greater value, a quarter or a penny. Well, if you're familiar with your coins, you know that there are 25 pennies for every quarter. So therefore, the quarter is the greater value. Well, this is all well and good, but what happens when we introduce something you're not so familiar with? For example, what if I were to say, which is greater, a penny or a Colombian peso? Well, unless you're an expert in international exchange rates, what? You're not going to get this one. And the same thing's true with fractions. There are certain fractions that you're very familiar with, like for example, 1/2 or 1/4, a quarter. But there are other fractions maybe you're not so familiar with. Well, just for today, I will learn how to compare fractions. That is, I'm going to show you a few strategies that you can use to make it easier to compare fractions, ones you're familiar with and ones you're not so familiar with. Ready to get started? Let's do it. I want to begin by creating some number lines and plotting some familiar fractions on those number lines. So to start, let's just focus on the first one. It's important for us to understand that today we're dealing with fractions that are less than 1. They fall on a number line between the number 0 and 1. Next, we want to make sure that we can figure out where the halfway point is on our number line. And you guessed it, we're going to mark it with 1/2. After we do that, we want to divide it even further into fourths. You'll notice I did a couple things a little differently here. Instead of writing 0 to start my number line, since we're counting by fourths, I wrote 0/4. And then I divided it up into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. I marked it as 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. Anytime you have the numerator and denominator showing up as the same number, in this case 4/4, it equals 1 whole. You can think of it in terms of, I had a pizza, I cut it into 4 slices, I ate all 4 of them. 4 out of 4 equals 1 whole pizza. I also want to point out here that 1/2 and 2/4 are equal. You can look at it this way. 2 is half of 4. Right, now let's move on to the last one. This time I divided it even further. This time I made it eighths. 0/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and, yep, 8/8. I want to point out a couple of equivalent fractions here. Do you notice how 1/4 and 2/8 are the same? And how 2/4 and 4/8 are the same as saying 1/2? We have 3/4 and 6/8 are the same. It's important for us to see these equivalencies. It will help us out later on. The next thing that I'd like to do is go over a couple of important symbols. When we're comparing fractions, or any numbers for that matter, we're going to use 4 different symbols. The first one is greater than, followed by less than, equal to, and in some cases we'll even use not equal to. So to start, the number 100 is a larger number than the number 25. So we're going to write the greater than symbol. You can think of it in terms of an alligator eating the bigger number. And we read it like this: 100 is greater than 25. For the next example, we have 100 and 101. Well, naturally 101 is larger, so we're going to have the alligator eat that number. The way we read this is 100 is less than 101. And finally, we have 100 is equal to 100. Now, we could have the symbol for each one of these to be simply not equal. But we want to be a little bit more specific and say which one is greater and which one is less than. Now that we've got that, it's time for us to start comparing some fractions. As you can see, I've drawn some number lines. We're going to compare 1/2 and 5/12, 1/4 and 1/8, 5/6 and 3/8. I'm going to start with just the first one and cover up everything else with my cover sheet. 1/2 and 5/12. Now this is something, granted, I know some of you can do in your head, but what I'd like to do is have you work it out with me. We're going to start by creating our number line. I've drawn the line right here, and I'm going to fill in a few important numbers or values. We're going to start with 0, and we're going to end our number line with the number 1. In other words, our number line represents one whole. I'm going to plot 1/2, which is right here. And as far as 5/12 goes, this is a little tricky. We want to think about an equivalent fraction. What would 1/2 of 12 be? That's right. 6 is 1/2 of 12, so 6/12 would be equivalent to 1/2. So we can write that right here. 6/12 and 1/2 goes right here, which means that 5/12 would be somewhere over here. And that means that 1/2 is greater. So 1/2 is greater than 5/12. Think you're getting it? On to the next one. We're going to follow the same process here. We're going to start with our number line. Start at 0, end at 1. We're going to mark our halfway point. Let's see if that helped. 1/4 is something, then 1/8. I'm not seeing it. But I've got a trick. I can split this up into fourths as well. 1/4, this would be 2/4, 3/4, and finally 4/4 would go over here. Well, how many 8ths go into 1/4? Do you remember from our number lines earlier that we split them in half? So our 1/8 would go here, our 2/8 would be here, finally 4/8 I'll put over here to equal 1/2. You see how I'm using my equivalencies and my number line to figure out that 1/4 is actually greater than 1/8. All right, time for the last one. Let's make it a tricky one. 5/6 and 3/8. I'm going to start with the process that I've been using here. 0, 1, and 1/2. Now, what would 1/2 of 6 equal? Well, that would be 3/6, correct? So here's 3/6. And what would 1/2 of 8 be? Well, 4/8. Sorry, let me clear that up a little bit. 4/8. Well, 3/8 is going to be over here. And 5/6, well, that's greater than 3/6, correct? So it would be over here, which means that this number, 5/6, is going to be greater than 3/8. So there you have it. The next time your teacher asks you to compare two fractions, hopefully it'll be just as easy as saying, which one's bigger, a whale or a beach ball? You can handle that, right? For all the 4th grade teachers, I'm Mr. Guyton. Until next time, be good to each other.